very interesting topic. This is a monthly webinar series. Usually, many of you who attend our webinars that are organized by Synergip, who attend our webinars often see topics related to agile software development. Of course, all of it directed towards early stage or venture-backed technology companies. Today we picked a slightly different topic, but still addressing the needs of early stage technology companies. The topic is slicing pie, dividing equity in a startup. So many of you who've been on different sides of a startup company as a founder or as a management team member or otherwise in any capacity, there's a challenge we have all faced, and I have faced personally this a number of times, which is how do you really divide up equity either as a founding team, you're starting up a company and you are 2 or 3 founders have the bright idea to get together, but how do you divide the equity among yourself? Or often someone joins you a little later, 6 months later, a year later, but they're essentially coming in a founder capacity and taking some sort of a sweat equity or some combination thereof role. How do you, share the equity with this new person? And then, of course, what happens along the way before the cash flow positive hits, you won't pay in the form of equity to other service providers, whether they're software development people or whether they're marketing people. And in all those cases, it's a very sticky situation. How to really, in a meaningful way, tackle this issue of dividing equity. So I'm glad that we have this topic being addressed today. So the slicing pie approach that you'll hear is actually a very logical and practical approach to tackling this difficult issue of dividing up equity in a startup. And before I introduce the presenter, let me just quickly go over quick logistics, very similar to what we do every month. We'll have roughly 45 minutes or so of presentation, and then any questions you have, please keep typing your questions into the Q&A panel. And I'm Hemant Alhans, I'm founder CEO of Synergip. I host these webinars every month. I'll keep track of these questions, and wherever I feel the question belongs to be in the flow of the discussion, I'll pick that question and bring it up along the way. And some questions I will reserve the right to hold them to the end, and then we'll reserve about 10-15 minutes at the end to take general questions on the subject matter that we cover today. With that, let me introduce, and we will make the document and the recording available within a day or two of webinar today. But let me introduce the speaker. I'm delighted to actually have a uniquely qualified speaker, Mike Moyer, for this presentation. Mike has approached this topic from all angles that one can think of. He's a founder and entrepreneur of a number of startup companies himself, so he's been in those shoes a number of times. He's been a management team member in other people's startups, so he's been in those shoes a number of times. He's, of course, an investor and mentor, so he ends up seeing and helping other companies and get off the ground. So he's seen startups from that angle and seen what goes on there. And then he teaches entrepreneurship at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, which is my alma mater and #1 ranked business school. So I'm also delighted to have someone from who teaches there present this webinar. He also teaches at Northwestern University the entrepreneurship course, so that's excellent. And above all, he's written the book, this topic, and he will talk about his book also. The book is titled Slicing Pie. So with that, let me turn it over to Mike.
This is a topic that I've struggled with throughout my career, as many people have, and I wrote down a guide on how I thought it should be handled, and turned it into a book. And to my delight, the book has really taken off as sort of an alternative to traditional equity division. So what I'm going to go through today is how the concept works, and hopefully answer a few questions from you as the audience. I really appreciate being here. The first question, one thing I want you to know is I have a raffle for an autographed copy of Slicing Pie at slicingpie.com/Synergip. So if you want to go there, you will be able to sign up for a copy of the book. First question that you want to ask yourself is, why do you start companies? Why do people start companies? And there's all sorts of answers for this in terms of changing the world. So the idea here is that we work hard now in the startup company. We'll have fun along the way. And then someday there's going to be a big payout. And the problem is we don't know what that payout's going to be. Even the smartest financial modeler can't figure out the future. And that's the problem we have with startups, because startup companies, most of them go out of business, but some of them pay out huge. Some of them are singles and doubles and triples. We just have no idea what that payout's going to be. So despite our best efforts, we're stuck with this big unknown. And the reality is, a startup company, for the most part, is worth zero. It's worth $0 because they're not worth anything if you can convince someone that it's worth something. So we don't know what the answer to that question is going to be. So in a typical fixed equity split, which is what most people use today, people go in and do something like this. They go in 50-50. You and a partner go in 50-50. Things are great. Everything starts out fine. And hopefully this is how you can move forward. Or sometimes they'll do a 60-40 split. Maybe the founder of the company believes he deserves a little bit more. Or maybe the founder thinks he deserves a lot more and has a junior partner. Whatever the case is, when you do a fixed equity split like this, it always turns into problems. Because as things change, as they inevitably do in startup companies, you'll have to go back to the negotiation table and renegotiate this equity split. What happens if you want to bring somebody else in? So there's all kinds of things that could happen. So in the fixed equity split, people think if you do 50-50 up front, you'll get 50-50 later on. And that works great if you can do exactly the same amount of work and nothing changes throughout the whole startup company. But if things change, you're in big trouble. So what if you do all the work and your partner does nothing? You're stuck with that person owning half your company. Or what if you bring in another guy? So, for instance, let's say you're a marketing guy and a development guy, and you want to bring in a new developer. Does the marketing person give up their equity, or does the development person give up their equity? Or do you both dilute equally? Questions like that always lead people back to the negotiation table to start from scratch and renegotiate the equity. Well, what if somebody wants to quit? Your partner wants to quit, but he owns half your company. What do you do then? Does he give you back your equity, or do you take it back, or does he get to keep it, or what are the circumstances under which someone keeps equity? Or what if you want to quit? If you get tired of that, or you have to go back and get a real job, what are you going to do? There's a million things that can happen in a startup company that change the dynamic with regard to what's going on in your company, which is why fixed equity splits always run into problems. Even if you luck out, there's still some stress associated with fixed equity split. I had a case once where the partner actually died. The guys had been at it for about 6 months. The partner was killed in a car accident. And the spouse felt entitled to the equity, which is fine, but there was a lot more work to do and a lot more investment that was needed. There was years and years before a payout would happen. And does that person dilute, or now you have to negotiate with the person's spouse? So everything can change in a startup company, and they always do startup. The only thing that doesn't change about startups is the fact they always change. When we do a fixed split and things change in the company, it becomes no fair anymore. If one guy does all the work and the other person still owns half the company, it's not fair. It's not fair, it's not fun. And that's what we want to avoid. So what we've developed here is a system that will keep it fair. Because fairness makes your company fun. If you're not having fun in a startup company, you're having problems. And we need to create a program where fairness becomes fun. So we need a program that's perfectly fair. And by perfectly fair, I mean that every person always has exactly the amount of equity they deserve, no more, no less. Always perfectly fair. The one promise I make people is that no matter what happens in your startup, you will always have exactly what you deserve, nothing more, nothing less. We want to reward participants for contributions to the company. And I'm talking about actual contributions, not potential contributions. If you think about hiring someone, let's say you hired me for $100,000 a year. When I start work for you, you don't give me a check on day one for $100,000 a year. You pay me bi-weekly or bi-monthly. Whatever you do, you don't pay me the whole chunk up front, because you want to reward me for my actual contributions and not my potential contributions. In startups, we have a tendency to reward people for their promised contributions and not their actual contributions. We want to provide ongoing motivation to continue contributing. So if I get my 50% up front, and I think you can do the business by yourself, then I can back out with my 50%. I don't have any motivation to continue working. We want to accommodate changes in the team. As people come and go, and people quit, and people join the team, we want to make sure we accommodate that. We want to remain flexible in the face of rapid change. The key here is flexibility and the ability to accommodate change. And as changes happen, everyone can rest assured they will always have exactly what they deserve. and it's called a dynamic equity split. A dynamic equity split is an equity split that changes based on the different contributions from different players in the team. And here's how it works. When you work hard now, you'll get what you deserve, exactly what you deserve later. So your share is in direct proportion to what you contributed. If you contribute 50% of the work that it takes to make the company successful, you will get 50% of the rewards when the rewards come. If you contribute 10% to what it takes to make the company successful, you will get 10% of the rewards. If you contribute 69.2 of the contributions that make the company successful, you should get 69.2 of the reward. It's very fair, it's very logical, and it's very fun to keep things fair. So the concept I design is called a grunt fund, and a grunt is someone who does the hard work of starting a company. They do the dirty work, they do the smart work, they do the branding, the sales, the cleanup, everything. And these little animals are grunts, and they're my analogy for today. Here's how it works. The first thing you do is you assign a leader you can trust. This sometimes goes without saying, but in startup companies, people have a tendency to put a lot of agreements in place and hire attorneys to try to protect people from the future. If your first phone call is to an attorney to protect you from your partner, you're not in business with someone you trust. You need to work with someone you can trust. And usually this person is the founder of the business, the person who has the idea, whoever's putting the team together is usually the leader. The second thing you do is you assign a theoretical value to various inputs provided by each participant. A theoretical value is a pretend value that allows us to measure relative value, not actual value, but how valuable is something relative to something else. So a junior engineer right out of college has a lower relative value than a senior CTO from Oracle. That person's contribution is probably going to be much higher than a junior employee because they have a lot more experience. So it's a relative value that counts here, not an actual value. There is no actual value. The actual value of the company is 0. So there's no way to divide by 0. So we have to have a value that we can use to divide and create percentages. So theoretical value is very important. The next step you do is you determine the percentage of ownership by dividing individual value contributed by the total value contributed. That will equal your shares in a given moment. So over time, as people make more contributions, the theoretical base value will change, and the value of what they produce will change, and that means their equity shares will change. So step 1, trustworthy leader. In a grunt fund, one person holds all the equity. Now there are different corporate structures, LLCs, and corporations that require some slightly different legal work. There are ways of setting this up. For the most part, the leader will hold the equity. In some cases, you never have to actually issue legal equity as long as the rewards are divided appropriately. They manage the grunt fund, and they keep track of various contributions, and they also deal with departing grunts. So I'll talk later about the rules that apply to departing grunt and what they get to keep and what they don't get to keep. And the leader will be the person that kind of makes those decisions along with the other team members. The second thing you do is assign a theoretical value. Now, we have all kinds of things that can go into a startup company. Time is one of them. Money is another one. Those are the most common, time and money. But we also bring relationships to the table, credit in the form of credit cards, loans. Ideas are important. Resources, equipment, facilities, supplies, things that a startup uses to create value for their customers. So everything has a theoretical value. In my book, I outline very specifically how to calculate the theoretical value for all these inputs. For instance, time. Time is a function of opportunity cost and cash compensation. So the negotiated base salary is the salary that you would otherwise get if the startup could pay you full price. So there's a times in my life where I've worked for companies for no equity. They pay me my market rate. I'm happy with that. I know that some people have equity in the company, but I don't, but I'm getting my market rate, and I'm fine with that. So my negotiated base salary is whatever I would have to get paid without having equity at all. You subtract cash compensation the startup is paying you. So if the startup is paying you cash compensation, you subtract it because it's no longer a risk. Equity represents risk that you won't get paid. It's a future payout, and they have to account for the risk today. So if you're getting cash compensation, that money is not a risk, so you don't deserve equity for it. You multiply it by 2, and I use that multiplier, it's a number that I made up based on my experience, to reflect the fact that if someone's taking a lot of risk, they'll never get paid. So this is basically 100% risk premium on the money. which is a great return on investment, but it accounts for the fact that most jobs will never pay out because most of them fail. Then I divide by 2,000, and that creates the grunt hourly resource rate, which is the theoretical relative value of an hour a person's time. So each person will have a different theoretical base value based on the negotiated base rate and how much they're getting paid. So in a lot of cases, you just pay an employee, you don't have to give them equity at all. I myself have a number of employees that I pay a full-time salary to. They know I'm in the business of starting companies with equity, but they don't care because I'm paying them a nice market rate salary. Here's an example. Let's say my market rate is $100,000, and the startup is going to pay me $25,000. That means I put $75,000 at risk. I multiply it by 2 to account for the fact that I never get paid. That equals $150,000. Divide by 2,000 gives me a grunt hourly resource rate of $75 an hour. So every hour I work is quote unquote worth $75. Small amounts of money I multiply by 4 to come up with a theoretical value. So when you put $1 into a startup company, you're taking a lot of risk and you'll never get that dollar back. So I put a 4 times premium on that. And I do that, 1, to account for the risk, and 2, to provide incentive for people to put cash into the company. It's much harder to save $1 than it is to make $1. So your time is not only worth as much as your money. So I put a high value of small amounts of money, short-term operating money. Everything has a theoretical value. So the theoretical value of a relationship, if it turns into a sale, will be unpaid commission times 2. If you have the idea for the company and you spend a lot of money developing it, equal to those development costs, or what I like better is a royalty on the idea and revenues equal to unpaid royalties. If you bring small supplies, staplers, office supplies, pencils, and things like that, it's either worth nothing if you had it already, or it's equal to cash if it's an unreimbursed expense. If I go out and spend my own money, treat it as cash as an unreimbursed expense. If you're bringing a piece of capital equipment like a truck or a printing press, for instance, if you purchase it for the company, I treat it as it's cash times 4. If you've had it for less than a year and you're giving it to the company, I treat it at cost. And if you had it for over a year, I treat it at the resale value. I just look up the resale value on eBay or Kelly Blue Book or something like that. So everything has a theoretical value, a fair way of treating the money as it goes into the company. And I have a cheat sheet on my website, slicingpie.com, that describes all these calculations in detail so you can apply them to all the different contributions. So here's how it works in practice. There are 3 grunts here. There's a junior developer who's going to bring time to the business. He's grunt number 1. There's the founder of the business who has ideas, put some equipment in, and some time. And then grunt number 3 is his rich uncle who brought in cash and credit cards and some important people. So the theoretical base value is all the time and contributions each person made added into one big enchilada. That's the theoretical base value. That's the pretend value of this company. Remember, it has no actual value. So we assign a theoretical value, which is the sum of all the contributions that have been made. So each person's share is equal to their contribution divided by the theoretical base value. So here's grunt number 1 share, here's grunt number 2 share, and here's grunt number 3 share. Again, their contributions divided by the total contributions of everybody. So here's a table. The theoretical base value on number 10 is $91,000. This is $2,000 worth of time for grunt number 1, $4,000 worth of time for grunt number 2, plus $15,000 in supply and equipment, plus $7,000 in intellectual property. Grunt number 3, who brought mostly cash, is putting in $60,000 cash and $3,000 as a commission from a sale that was made based on a relationship he brought. So at the end of the day, this particular period, the theoretical pretend value is $91,000, and each grunt's share is equal to 2%, 29%, and 69%. So here's what the pie looks like. It makes perfect sense that the rich uncle who brought $60,000 into the business should get more equity than the junior developer who spent a few hours developing code. So this pie is nicely balanced. And let's say you bring in a 4th person, a salesperson. This is grunt number 4. He's going to put some time into the business, and he's going to bring some important relationships. I've made a mistake many times in my career of overestimating how many relationships a person has will materialize. They say, hey, I got a great Rolodex, so we'll give them a lot of equity up front, and none of those relationships were materialized, and just overpaid that person. But in the grunt fund, they're rewarded for exactly what they're able to contribute. So here's the sales guy coming in, and now let's assume for a second that nobody else is doing any more work on this company. We simply add in what the sales guy did into the theoretical base value, so the theoretical base value is now growing, as it will over time. We redistribute everyone's equity. So this assumes no one's doing anything else. So here's grunt number 1 share. Here's grunt number 2 share. Grunt number 3, and grunt number 4. So now the table looks like this. So everything else is the same, but grunt number 4 came in, put some time in, and made a nice sale for which he was entitled to a commission of $10,000. These are all theoretical dollars, and you can see things have been redistributed. Now, people have a little bit less equity than they had before, but that's okay, because now the company's worth more money, or where it's getting closer to a point where it will be worth money, because now they have a great salesperson on board, they're generating some actual revenue, they're getting some credibility. This is what companies need to move towards. So, grunt number 3, even though his share has dropped down a little bit, he should be perfectly happy with the knowledge that his company is growing as it should be growing. So here's the pie distribution again, and now we have grunt number 4 as having a chunk of this pie. It's readjusted to make everyone perfectly in balance. Now sometimes you want to remove somebody. How you remove somebody from a grunt fund or from any company is very important, because how you treat them is there's fair treatment and there's unfair treatment. And I find that when people have a falling out at a company, it's usually because they were removed from the pool unfairly. So there are 4 circumstances under which someone can leave. You can be fired for good reason. Fired for good reason implies you're not doing your job, or you're doing something so illegal or unethical that you're fired on the spot. But for performance reasons imply that you were given warnings and opportunity to correct your behavior. So you can be fired for good reason, or you can be fired for no good reason, meaning the company maybe changed strategy or they had to have cutbacks, but you were doing your job as asked, but for whatever reason they had to let you go. You can resign for good reason. A good reason to you may not be a good reason for the company. These are sort of legal things that apply. If the company moves 1,000 miles away and expects me to relocate my family, that would be a good reason for me to resign. It wasn't my fault that the company needed to move and I couldn't work. The circumstances changed, the company I couldn't work anymore. I can also resign for no good reason. Maybe I just can't afford to work there anymore. I need to get a full-time job or somewhere else. So I can resign for no good reason. If I'm fired for good reason or I resign for no good reason, I'm essentially leaving the company in the lurch. It's my fault. I'm causing the reason for my departure. So I should bear the brunt of the expense and the cost of that departure. On the other hand, if I resign for good reason or I'm fired for no good reason, it's the company causing my departure, not me. I was doing my job as expected, so it's the company that should bear the burden of that departure. And I'll show you how it works in a second. So if you're getting fired for good reason because you're not doing your job or you're being unethical, or you resign for no good reason because you just you leave the company in the lurch, I should not expect to pay for the time I contributed. I should adjust my other inputs, my cash, my equipment, things like that, down to my dollar amounts without the multiplier. I should provide the company the opportunity to buy me out, and I should sign a non-compete and honor the non-compete. Now, many states will not support a non-compete in a court of law, but that doesn't really matter. This isn't about legal requirements. This is about moral requirements. If you leave a company because you're not doing your job or you just on a whim decide to leave, you can't turn around and compete with them. It's not fair. It's not right. It's not ethical. So a non-compete should be expected. However, if I'm resigned for good reason, or if I'm fired for no good reason, I should keep the pie that I've earned. They should buy it back at the full theoretical value if they want to buy it back at all. And I should not be required to sign a non-compete. I should be free to compete with the company. That doesn't mean I can rip the company off and do exactly what they're doing, but I can compete in the same industry, which is fine, or alternatives. So this is fair treatment. Now, it's painful for a company to lose someone for no good reason. But if that's the case, it's a built-in sort of retention program for that keeps the company on it and the employee on it. So let's figure out how this works in practice. So for 4 grunts, let's say grunt number 1 wasn't doing his job, he was given repeated warnings, and we're going to fire that person. What we do is we simply remove his contributions from the theoretical base value. He's no longer relevant because he's no longer with the company. And we redistribute the shares according to people's contributions. So here's number 2, number 3, and number 4. So as you can see, we've zeroed out number 1. These people have adjusted out. Now, you might think, wow, this is great. They have more equity than they had before, but they had now they're worse off because they've had to fire someone to find somebody new. So when you fire somebody, you're actually kind of leaving the company in the lurch. It's not a very good situation. The shares have been redistributed appropriately. And here's what the pie would look like at the end of that period. Now, time goes on. People continue to contribute. So now we have 2 grunts left that are actually contributing to the company. The rich uncle isn't doing anything else. Number 2 and number 4 continue to work. So here's an example of time going on. In this case, both of them added more time to the theoretical base value. There it is right there. And again, everyone readjusts appropriately. Again, run number 3, the rich uncle, his equity share is shrinking, but he's fine with that because he knows that overall the value of that's going to be worth something someday. And it's perfectly fair to shrink that way. So what we created is a fair system that reallocates equity on a rolling basis to make sure people are rewarded for their contributions, their actual contributions. We provide ongoing motivation to continue to work. The more I work, the more I earn. And it accommodates changes in the team. I can subtract and add something very easily. And no matter what changes, no matter how the company changes, as they always do, this system will maintain flexibility and reward people for what's been going on. Now, sooner or later, you can outgrow a run fund. Most important time to do that is when you can just simply pay people when you don't use equity. When you can't pay people, you have to use equity. So if you get real revenues or some positive cash flow or a significant Series A investment, you can use that cash to pay down people's hourly resource rate and buy the things you need instead of using equity to acquire those things. So you will naturally outgrow a run fund as soon as you can pay people. So this provides a lot of incentives to start to get to revenue as quickly as possible, generate positive cash flow as quickly as possible, and raise some real money as quickly as possible. So what's nice about this is everyone's always perfectly aligned. Everybody knows they're in the same boat, being treated the same way. Their incentives are perfectly aligned. Their rewards for staying at the company are aligned, and their discouragement for leaving the company are perfectly aligned. So I outline in detail how this works. I'm sure there's some feedback. But the book, Slicing Pie, is a step-by-step guide. It tells you exactly how to implement. Version 1.2 is available on Amazon right now. I have a new version that's available on the website. And if you buy the book, you get free upgrades for life by signing into the upgrade list. And so whenever I produce an upgrade, I release it. And the upgrades come in the form of updates, answering people's questions, elaborating on certain topics, things like that. The book constitutes the same. And that's how dynamic equity still works. If you want to contact me, have any questions whatsoever, I'm always open to be contacted. And you can chat with me in real time on the website if I'm at my desk.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. And again, I apologize everybody and audience for the audio issue. So let's do this. At this point, all of you have gone through this walkthrough and overview with Mike. So if you have any questions, we already have some questions that are here. If you have any questions, please reflect on the content and put those questions in your Q&A panel. And while you're doing that, I'll give a quick introduction to Synergip for those of you who may not be familiar with us. We organize these webinars every month. So Mike, if you can advance the page, or maybe I can do that now. Let me do if I can.
You're up.
Okay, good. So we'll just use yours. Okay, so and if you go to the next page, so Synergip is essentially a software product development partner, typically for small to mid-sized technology companies. Our clients tend to be early-stage technology companies in the growth phase, and hence this webinar is very relevant for most of the companies who work with us. And for every company that we work with us, we essentially become an extension of the in-house engineering team. So we have a dedicated team for every client, and working with us, we help our clients reduce the complexity and risk of software development because of our expertise that we bring to the table of agile software development practices, which we believe work very well with our clients in the early stages and even in the later stage phase. We bring the right level of discipline of software development, which is good engineering practices and discipline of software development, balancing that against the rapid and quick time to market type consideration that our clients have. Agile allows us to do that very well. And in addition, we are able to provide significant cost advantage to our clients. We have a dual show delivery model. We have a development center located in India and a small team on the US side in this time zone, in the US time zone. So the combination allows us to serve our clients very well while providing them a 50% cost advantage. And finally, we are able to provide, we give a tremendous flexibility to our clients that whenever they are getting to the point of doing some sort of an exit or for any other reason, they want to convert the team that is working for them at Synergip into a captive operation, they can do that with us. So thus they have their cake and they eat it too, essentially. They get to do good software development in a capital cost efficient way with high degree of flexibility for the long-term exit. That's Synergip. Mike, if we can just go to the next page, which is a bunch of logos essentially giving a glimpse of a number of our clients, and as you see, as the page refreshes in those screens, because it has a bunch of artwork on it, they're all pretty much, most of them are small to mid-sized technology companies, with a few really small companies, few really large companies, but most of them are small to mid-sized technology companies. So I think that's just a quick overview.